My name is Singerman, and I was a problem child, an underachiever, a drug addict. And I am a father, a husband, a success story, a millionaire, a CEO, and a boss. So it's very easy to underestimate the importance of a credit score, of your personal credit, what it means to your life, what it can do for you if you have good credit, and how it can affect your life in a negative way if you have bad credit. So I want to tell you a little bit about me just to start. I did not always have good credit. Matter of fact, I had pretty bad credit. So I think that there is a misunderstanding in terms of how important credit is. I think a lot of people out there don't realize that credit can literally change your life, that it can not only allow you to buy something that you want, but it can also affect the price that you get it for, the percent interest that you're paying. And that can make a huge difference. Just a few percent on a loan for a mortgage can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars over the 30 years. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I was successful at transforming my credit and hopefully give you some tips, some secrets, and some advice that you can use to basically make your life better, because credit is that important. It can definitely make a big impact on what you do with your life, what you're able to do, the things that you're able to get. So basically, when I started on my credit journey, I really wanted, about 6 years ago, I really wanted a new car. Me and Darielle had just gotten together, my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, and we went to go look at a car that I really wanted. It was an Acura TL, and I was like, to me, I never had a nice car. I never really had a new car, so this was like a dream. And so we went and looked at it. It was $400 a month. It was $379 a month, actually. And I knew that I could afford it. I was working at RX Muscle at the time. I was the editor-in-chief of the site, and I was making really good money. And I knew I could afford it. So we went there, and I talked to the guy, and I showed him my income tax statement and everything, and I felt pretty confident. And then they ran my credit, and I had a 498 credit score. And the guy told me it didn't matter that I could afford the car. It didn't matter that I could pay the notes, that the bank did not say I was an acceptable risk, that I seemed too unstable in terms of my paying and my history with credit. And I gotta be honest, I was pretty depressed. I was like, man, like, how could I have come this far in my life from all my problems I had as a kid to where I felt like I was doing pretty good, but still nobody would take the risk on me. So Darielle and I went home, and we decided to take my credit seriously, to figure out how to fix it, because her credit was pretty good at the time, and mine was pretty shitty. So I figured, like, okay, I'm gonna learn everything that I could, and I'm gonna make my credit excellent. And so over the process of about the last 5 years of working on the credit, it went from 498 to now it varies around 780 to about 760-ish. So it goes up and down depending. So I've been very successful in making this happen. I have gotten 2 mortgages for 2 homes. I had my first home that we sold and moved into a much larger home than I live in now. That is, it's like literally a dream home. And my credit score had to be excellent to get a house like this and to get a great interest. I only pay 3.5% on this house, which is a great interest rate on a home loan. I have gotten all the cars that I could have ever dreamed of, cars that I couldn't even dream of, that I've been able to afford and be able to purchase with at a great credit rate, and many other things. And all of that, to some degree or another, has depended upon my credit score. So I wanted to let you guys know out there that anything is possible, that in just a few years, and certainly in 5 years, you can literally turn it all around. Doesn't matter how bad it was or mistakes you've made in the past. So I'm gonna give you my list of tips and give you the information that I've learned over the past 5 years to take from a very, very poor credit score to an excellent credit score. Because the truth of the matter is, it's just some habits, some wisdom, and some things that you can correct to make your credit score excellent in a very short period of time. So number one, keep your balances low. Actually, no, I'm gonna go even further back. So some of you may be thinking, you know what, Aaron, I want to make my credit great, but I don't even have any credit. When I try to get a credit card, they don't say my credit's bad. They say you don't have any credit. That happens to a lot of people. So how do I build credit at all if I've got none? So the first thing I would do, if you can't get a credit card, now I'm assuming you've applied to get a normal credit card and you can't get it. Because obviously the first step is to establish credit. So if you can't establish credit with a normal credit card, go and do what I did initially, and was get a secured credit card. That means there's really no risk. So your credit limit is whatever you secure. The great thing, in other words, you give them the money. So my first credit card was $300 limit. I sent the $300 to the credit card, and they used that as my revolving balance. So I was playing with my own money, basically. There's no risk there. You're basically playing with the house's money. And so the cool thing about this is they actually report that credit card. So it gets reported as a score. So every month when you pay your bill, or as long as it's in good standing, you're getting a green check mark, paid, paid, paid. The other thing that I did right away was get a Dillard's card. I don't know if you're not around a place that has Dillard's. This is something like a JCPenney or something like that. I got a very low limit. I want to say like $200. But I established some sort of credit with these things. And that's something that you need to do first. You need to have credit. You have to establish it in some form of way. The other thing that I did was I ended up getting the car. I eventually got the Acura TL. It was a dream car of mine, and I felt extremely proud and happy to own it. And I made sure that I paid that thing on time. I put it in, I got like my auto pay, and I started establishing credit through an actual car that I bought on my own as well. Now, you may not be able to get an Acura TL or something like that, but you can get something. And by getting something, even if you pay a high interest rate, if you pay it on time, now you're establishing good credits. That's very important. The number two thing, which is what I was about to get to before, is keeping your balances low. So people think that it's 30%, that you should keep your balances at 30%. I got news for you. You should keep your balances at 10%. That doesn't mean that you can't use your card, but just means that you are not keeping a balance larger than 10%. So if you only have a $200 limit, basically you got to get rid of all of it. So you're only talking about leaving $20. So I would pay it off. I remember back when I first started looking into this, people would say, oh, you need some balance. You have to have some balance because it shows that you're using. That's bullshit. As long as you're keeping the card active, in other words, you're not canceling it or you're not paying any of the fees if there's a fee attached to it. As long as you're keeping it active and you don't go years without using it, you're establishing good credit because you're getting that green check mark saying you're paying it. So it's very important to keep the cards going and to keep your balance under 10%. Something that I found that was very surprising that I made a mistake on, that hopefully you won't, is once I started getting going, I canceled a few cards that were old, very old cards. I said, well, I don't use these anymore. My credit limit's only $300. I'm going to cancel them. And what ended up happening was I took a hit on my credit because the length of your credit is also important. So the longer you have credit accounts, you have good standing of credit, the better. So even if you have a very, very old card that has very little credit that you never use, you need to keep it active because by closing it, you're reducing the amount of time that you had the credit. So in other words, if you have 5 credit cards and 3 of them are a year old, but you have 2 that are 10 years old, if you get rid of one of them, the average time that you've had the credit goes down because they average the accounts. So it's important to have old credit. The older, the better. The other thing with credit cards, old ones are ones that you've gotten, is to request a credit increase. It's an interesting thing because the size of the credit that you have, the credit available to you, is very important because it shows basically like trustworthiness. So even if you're not going to use it, so in other words, like for me, say I have a card that's $5,000, I would, if I'm conscious of my credit, I'm at a point now where I'm not looking at it as hard as I used to. But if I was trying to increase my credit, I would call that creditor, even though I don't need any more than $5,000, I'm only using less than 10%. I would ask for $10,000, for $15,000. One of the tricks that I would use, and I have used successfully, I have credit cards over $100,000 limit, is I would say, I really want to use your Visa card or whatever, but your limit is not high enough, so I'm ending up using these other cards instead of your card. But if I had a $50,000 credit, then I would just use your card and I wouldn't need to use the others. And that's a great reason that they will believe that then makes sense to raise it, because otherwise they're going to want to know why. Why do you need so much more credit? And you can't say because I want to make my credit report look good. They're going to be like, nah, it's not important to us. So it's very important to do that. Another trick of the trade that I like is if you have a family member or a friend or somebody that trusts you and you trust them, they can add you as an authorized user to their card. And this is a really sneaky trick. So if your grandma has had a card for 30 years, okay? She had a Visa for 30 years. She always pays on time. You don't want to do this with a person that doesn't pay on time, because if they're screwing up their credit, you're attached to it, it's going to screw up your credit too. But if you have a person that you feel very like they trust you, you trust them, and you know they're going to pay their bill, you can ask to be an additional authorized person on the credit card. And you know what the crazy thing is? You don't actually even need the credit card. You can tell them, hey, get my credit card and just rip it up or put it in your safety deposit box or whatever. Because just by being added on, now it increases not only your credit limit, because hopefully that person has a bigger credit limit than you, but it increases the length of the time that you've had the credit. That is a very big deal, and it should be easy if you have a parent or a relative, hopefully, somebody in your life that can do that for you. It can dramatically raise those two numbers, the amount of available credit and the length of the duration of you've had the credit. It's a very, very big deal, and that's a good suggestion. One of the basic things, I shouldn't even have to say this, but pay your bills on time. People don't realize that being late one time, just a little bit, can reduce your credit score by 40% or more, depending. So you forget to pay a credit card bill, you forget to pay your car note or something like that, and it could dramatically, devastatingly affect you. Put your credit card stuff, put it all on auto pay. Put everything that you can on auto pay so you don't forget. I had a bad thing happen to me one time that I ended up being able to get removed. But I had one of these Capital One cards that was very old. One of the ones I mentioned that was like $300 to this day. And I didn't want to cancel it because I didn't want to reduce my duration, my length of credit. So I kept this card open, and all of a sudden I got a call on my answering machine. I don't answer a lot of calls. I'm always screening the calls. So I didn't answer it. I listened to the voicemail later, and it said, your card is delinquent. Your Capital One card is delinquent 90 days. And I was like, holy shit. And it turns out my $19.99 annual fee had come up, and I hadn't paid it. It hadn't gotten paid. And I went and looked at my credit report, and it had dramatically affected. I don't even remember what happened in terms of the numbers. This is a few years ago. So Darielle and I actually got on the phone together, called the people, and explained how they're going to actually cost us our house. This is before our first house. We were saying, like, look, you just reduced the credit score from whatever it was, 680 to I don't know, it was like 600. It's like, now we weren't going to be able to get our mortgage. Please help us. We'll pay this fee and we'll pay extra and whatever you want. And thankfully, we talked to somebody reasonable over there, and they were actually able to remove it. But that's just an example of how badly it can affect you, from getting a good rate on a new house to having no house at all, just by making a mistake and not paying the note. Here's another interesting thing that kind of segues into something interesting. Removing debts. So if you have a bunch of debts that you didn't pay from years ago, it's an interesting scenario. I made a mistake early on where I owed about $8,000 to various vendors and creditors or whatever, and we called them up and we settled them, thinking this is going to be a good thing to do. This is one of the initial mistakes I made. So I called them all up and I was like, I'm going to do the right thing by these people. I'm going to pay them. And I settled a lot of these things. Maybe they're all little small things, but I settled a lot of them. And I didn't realize that by settling them, in other words, I negotiated a deal. So somebody I owed $300 to in 1997, I tell them, hey, I'll give you $100. They go, sure, I'll take it. And because that's a win for them. They recouped money they probably never thought they were going to get. And so what they do is they say on the credit report, it'll say this credit was settled or this credit was satisfied. Now that's not good. It sounds good, but in fact, it actually takes a bad mark, and brings it to the top. So unless you get it removed, now that's a big distinction. When you speak to somebody, you say, look, I'll give you the money, but it must be removed. Because if it's just settled or satisfied, it's actually going to hurt your credit by paying it, which is crazy. This whole credit system is all kind of a weird scam. All of the things I'm telling you, it's all bullshit. Very arbitrary numbers that almost mean nothing. It's like with the TL, where I could afford the Acura and I could show these people I was making significant money, that there's no way I wasn't going to pay it. None of that shit mattered. It was just some score out in the mist on the internet, or in some business that had rated me poorly. So all of it is kind of arbitrary, I'll certainly admit. So instead, make sure when you call them to settle something that they remove it. Very important. If they say they don't know or they can't guarantee it, you do not pay it under any circumstances. And that actually brings me to my next big tip, which is there are services out there. I'm going to recommend one specific service that worked really well for me called creditus.com. Creditus.com is $99 a month, and they do you pay for about 3 or 4 months, I think it is. Maybe it's 5 months, and they actually scrub your credit. And this is a thing that I think that people, and many of them maybe are scams, but I was always told that these are scams until somebody recommended it to me. I don't even know if he wants his name out there, but a real good friend recommended it to me, who helped me tremendously to get my first house. What these guys do is almost like, I almost want to say it's like a reverse scam on the creditors. So you have 30 days when you contact a creditor and dispute a charge and say it's not right or this is a mistake. They have 30 days to respond to you and say this is why. And so this company, Credit US, will actually contact them over every single mark you've ever had in your history and send them letters, hoping that they don't respond to some of them and are able to remove it. I don't know what the situation with these things are, but I know that Credit US was great for me and definitely helped me. And maybe I'm oversimplifying what they do, but it definitely helped me and alleviated a lot of the negative marks on my credit. And definitely made a big difference. I think they brought me up a good 60 points, just them. Another thing to think about is hard inquiries. Inquiries. I always say that word. Inquiries. So they got hard and soft. So the soft ones are totally okay. It's like when you use Credit Karma, that's the app I use, to check your own credit. That's called a soft. It's a soft version. Now, a hard version is what happens when you get a new credit card, open a new account, get a new car, get a mortgage or some sort of revolving debt. Very, very, very important to understand the distinction between the two. One hits your credit report and brings down the number temporarily. Another one, nobody can tell it happened. So when somebody says, hey, I need to know your social, you got to make sure you ask them why. What are you going to do with it? Is this going to be hard or soft? Or am I going to get this? Is this going to affect my credit score? Is it going to be seen? When somebody pulls my credit, will they see that I've had a dozen of these? It's a very big deal. And something that people don't realize is that it will drop your score temporarily, sometimes a lot. And so like if you're gonna buy a house or you're getting a mortgage, this is a very important time not to run your credit because it can affect you negatively pretty dramatically, especially adding a new account and having that happen at the same time. So I'll give you an example. When I was getting my first house, I was very tempted, and I'm very impulsive, or I was, especially in my past, with cars, because I could never afford a nice car. My parents didn't have nice cars. Nobody I knew even had nice cars. So it was always a dream of mine to get the cars, to get cars that I thought of when I was a kid or had a poster on my wall. And so when I was getting the new house, there was an opportunity to get a great deal on a car that I really liked. And man, I was like right on the edge of getting this car. And my broker, my banker told me, he said, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you get that car and they run your credit and you add a new account, you will not get the house because it could have affected it that dangerously. So you have to be careful. If you're trying to get a new credit card or you're trying to get your credit run for something really important, you do not want to run it for anything else for 6 months up to that point. And that's super duper important. It makes a big difference. I'm trying to think if there's anything else important for us to go over. I think I may have covered it all. I think honestly, the tips that I gave you just now are the pillars that I built my credit on and what allowed me to do the things that I have needed to do and have been important for business or for my personal life. The other thing, I'll address this quickly, is I have some friends out there and some business partners that don't really like using credit. And they feel like anything that you should buy, you should buy in cash, because otherwise you don't really afford it, right? You can't really afford it. And I understand what they're saying. It's obviously be very satisfying to buy a house cash or to buy cars that are just yours and has no attachment to the bank. I understand that, but I can assure you that is not the right business move because you want to have your capital freed up. Imagine if I had done that in the past and I bought my old house cash or whatever, because I could have done it. If I would have done that, then I wouldn't have been able to start other businesses. I wouldn't be able to start other opportunities that came to me. I wouldn't be able to have the money liquid to potentially invest it in the market or something else that would bring back a larger dividend. So like if I'm borrowing money for a house for 3%, 3.5%, I can in the market potentially make much, much more than that. Now, on a personal investment, so I started a new business, that same money could be thousands of times better used. So I just wanted to say as a quick point that credit is incredibly important. When you're in business, I have never needed to take out a business loan before. I certainly have had business credit cards, but I've never needed a business loan. But if we're growing really fast and I needed to take out a loan, how shitty would it be if I went to the banker, just like I did for that TL originally, and I said, Nana, I'm growing so fast, the business is doing so well, I need to have more inventory. So I need a business loan, a short-term business loan, almost like a bridge loan to get more inventory so I can sell it faster. And they said, sorry, Mr. Singerman, you have bad credit, you can't do it. And that happens all the time. Business loans are difficult to get, especially in the current economy. So by assuring that your credit is good, you're able to use the house's money to make bigger percentage interest that you hopefully could have any other way. So it's important, while it's great to own stuff and pay cash for things, I'm all for that, you have to be careful and do the smart thing too for your business and your family. So hopefully the video today helped you. If you have any other credit questions, I'm sure I forgot some stuff. This is something that I've studied and something that's been very, very important to me. And just like anything in my life, when it's important, I get really deep into it and try to learn everything that I can. So hit me up if you have any questions. Thank you guys for tuning in.